Greetings and welcome to MC101. I hope you're doing healthy and well. You and all yours. Please stay safe. This week in MC101, we've got two big things going on. One is a quiz, an online quiz, of course, and the second is we're going to start the chapter on media effects. All right, so regarding the quiz, it's all online. It'll be open throughout the week. Same as the previous quiz, about 25, 30 questions. The chapters will be news, PR, and advertising. So we started the class kind of talking about what is media, and this section is talking about some of the different organizations and businesses of media, and then we're going to get into the chapters now on the larger societal effects of media. What does that do to us as a society and a culture? So that'll be the chapter that we start. So online quiz. The chapter for this week, and we're actually going to spend 2 weeks on this chapter because I think it's one of the biggest and most important ones, is about media effects on society. So we're going to talk about a lot of different theories, and then we're going to get into a big aspect of this chapter about, does media cause certain behaviors in our society? Does it affect us that directly in certain ways? So I'm going to give you the overview for the first half of chapter 11 this week, and then we're going to do the second half of the chapter next week. Okay, so we're going to split this one up. So just real quickly, kind of moving through that, we're going to have to be able to answer questions like, how does media affect you personally and all of us as society? Like, does it make us want to buy things? Does the media make us believe things? Does it create expectations, maybe real and or false expectations? Does it make us more or less aggressive? This would be like you're watching late night TV and you see an ad for some kind of weird product and you're just like, yeah, I'll buy that. Does the media make you buy things or think that you need things? Does it make you believe things, political or philosophical or social? Does it create expectations? Have you ever in your life felt a smidge of disappointment that your life is not exactly like your favorite sitcom people's lives or your Disney Channel lives when you were growing up? Is that a false expectation that we get from the media? Last, that big question we'll tackle is, does the media make us more or less aggressive? All right, so that's kind of what the chapter opens up about. And we remember that we affect media, right? Changes in programming, changes in advertising. There are huge, seismic changes going on in the media right now because ad revenues are down and demand for content is up. People are actually watching TV news more, and yet the money's not there. There's all sorts of weirdness going on in the media business right now, and we have a direct effect on that. So kind of keep an eye on that one. All right, some of these effects, and we're going to talk about this a little bit because you should kind of understand where they come from, but most of this is kind of a historical background. One of the first ones is called bullet theory. And the idea in bullet theory, it's kind of an old idea that the media is so powerful that they can place a thought directly into our brain and we're almost helpless. It's almost like we're brainwashed, that because we saw it on TV or we saw it in a movie that we don't really have filters or screens. The power of the media is so strong, you can just, boom, put an idea in there and we're stuck with it. We can't change it. We're almost defenseless. It assumes that we're almost like robots, that we can't filter and decipher messages and evaluate them. And it's really not held to anymore. It grew out of the early ages of media, and people were honestly a little freaked out about it. There are references to War of the Worlds, the radio broadcasts, that some people thought was real. Not everyone. Most people knew it was a radio play, but some people heard it and overreacted or didn't hear the disclaimer or just made an assumption or just got carried away. And coming out of that, people became concerned that, well, is the media so powerful that it can kind of overwhelm our senses or overwhelm our own thinking? So that's what bullet theory is, that it's an idea almost like a hypodermic insert into your brain. All right. Some of the other ideas are minimalist effects, and you'll read about this in the text, and that's kind of what's called status conferral. It's related to agenda setting, if you remember that. If the media is talking about it, it must be important, so I should be thinking about it. That's status conferral. If the media spends a lot of time talking about the Kardashians, I guess I ought to think about the Kardashians because they must be important or the media wouldn't talk about them. That's that idea there. There's a concept in there called narcotizing dysfunction. It's one of my favorite phrases in the book. I just love that, narcotizing dysfunction. And what it means is that we can get so overloaded with information that our brain starts to shut down. We can't even really think about it anymore. And I bet you could relate to that. If you spend much time any day watching the news about the coronavirus and lockdowns and this and that, you're going to probably experience narcotizing dysfunction. You're going to get so much information and become so overwhelmed to be like, I can't even. I just don't. I can't. I'm done. I'm done. That's that feeling. And it happens when we're overwhelmed with too many media messages or highly repetitive messages where there's not much really new information, but because they got to talk 24/7, you kind of get overwhelmed with a tsunami of stuff and it short circuits your brain. And it's like, forget it, screw it, I'm done. That's what narcotizing dysfunction is. I love it. It's a phrase you could probably use with your parents someday, like, hey, I can't talk right now, I got narcotizing dysfunction. I love that one. All right, that gets through a lot of us. So bullet theory was rooted in the idea that media has a direct effect, that they show you something, boom, and you will act on it. I show you a car ad, you go buy a car. I show you this thing about this political thought, boom, you vote that way. That it was direct. Minimalist effects and status control is part of that, is that, well, media has an indirect effect. Yes, it still does affect us, but it's not a trigger that is that direct. It becomes part of our environment and part of our thinking. So that's what that one is about. Cumulative effects is related to that, and it kind of addresses that over time we get exposed to so many messages that we kind of just start to go along with it, or that we retreat into an echo bubble and we're only hearing things that we already think, and so everything we hear confirms what we believe or think we believe, and so we must be right and the other guy must be wrong. So that's cumulative effects. Okay. Media obviously does affect our society. I mean, I think it would be hard to argue that it doesn't. Some of the ways in which it does, one of them is called socialization. And it's the idea that we kind of grow up learning how we're supposed to behave by watching media. When family and churches and other big institutions were the primary storytellers to us, that's where we learned how we ought to act, how we ought to look, how we ought to be, how people get along. Now, we get most of those messages via the media, and it kind of leads us into some curious thoughts sometimes about how we ought to be or how we ought to act or what's right or wrong. Media can even change our living patterns. I mean, maybe not so much for you right now because you can access most anything you want when you want it. But when I was growing up, if I wanted to watch a TV show, I had to be in front of the TV at that time on that night, which meant I couldn't do other things. Oh, I can't go do that thing because my favorite show's on at 7 o'clock on Thursday. It was even called appointment TV for a while in the late 80s and the 90s, that people would clear their Thursday night to watch this block of comedies on NBC. It was called appointment TV. So we might change our living patterns to work with media. The other concept is called intergenerational eavesdropping. Man, I love all these great phrases. And what that means is that, well, kids used to mostly talk to kids, and grown-ups mostly talked to grown-ups, and there was a transition as you went through those phases, but we really had almost different lexicons, different languages, different ways of expressing. Well, now that's all kind of smashed up, and you've probably had that very uncomfortable realization of intergenerational eavesdropping when your parents or someone in their age group decided to use your slang. Oh, sorry, still too soon? You remember that? You remember how that felt? Or maybe you've had the awkward feeling of you'd heard somebody older use a phrase, and so you tried to use the same phrase and it wasn't quite right. Well, that's an effect of intergenerational eavesdropping. We're all hearing things from other generations and sometimes employing them, with mixed results. All right. The next big element that we're going to get into and where we'll kind of break for today is on stereotypes. Now, I think most everybody understands what a stereotype is, that it's painting in very broad brushstrokes that all people like this are like that, all people like that are like that. Every Italian is a good cook. Every young African American male is great at basketball. Every Southern girl is a dimwit, Southern belle. Every jock is an idiot. Stereotyping. Every professor is boring, right, and thinks they're funny and all of that. We understand, I think, what stereotypes are. What I want to talk about for a second, what I want you to think about is, why do we have stereotypes in the media? Now, some people might say that it's about power and control and money. I think sometimes, and that could be absolutely possibly true, I think sometimes it's because of storytelling in media that we want to get to the plot quickly, or we want to get to elements quickly. And so we paint characters, we just kind of brush them in with these real common kind of characteristics that most people know, almost like a caricature. And it's kind of lazy storytelling. It's like, well, okay, I'm going to put all the bad guys in black shirts and black hats. I'm going to put all the good guys in white hats. And that way, as soon as you look, bang, good guy, bad guy. It's a bit of laziness in storytelling, actually. And it just makes it quicker for the audience to kind of fill in the blanks and move through the story. I'm not defending it by any means. The question here is, do you think that the media perpetuates stereotypes? Do they do a good job at cleaning up stereotypes and treating people as individuals? Or does the media perpetuate stereotypes? And if so, what are the effects? I might say, well, that person that I know of another gender or orientation or race or religion, I know that person and they're okay. But most of them are not, because what I see in the media. Like, well, I've got a good friend who's a Muslim, and he's okay. I think he's a pretty good dude. But some of them are crazy. I see that stuff on the news and in movies. But the one I know, he's okay. Is that an effect of media stereotypes? Maybe. So that's one that we'll kick around in the forums as well. All right. I think that's going to take us to the most important parts of that. We're going to talk about a couple of things coming up next week. So we'll drill into a couple of specific areas. One is a pet peeve of mine, is what we do to women and women's images through the media, and what effect does that have. We're going to talk about violence, and does the media cause or perpetuate violence, or are there other things at play there? And what effect does it have on our perspectives of sex and gender and orientation, all that kind of category. So we're going to take a look at that stuff next week. So this week, kind of setting the table. Next week, we'll go into a couple of those specific topics. And next week, those probably going to give you some ideas about your final paper, or hopefully it should. All right. If you have questions, please email me. If you are an ad major and you're unclear on anything about advising or enrollment, you can shoot me that question as well. Actually, anybody can ask me any question. I'll do what I can. And we'll kind of keep those things going there. So watch Moodle for open and close on the quiz, and get that PowerPoint on media effects and start looking at that and going through your book, and then we'll continue this next week. All right, guys. We'll do a Zoom maybe in the next week or two. We'll kind of touch base again as things move a little deeper into the semester. So probably next week we'll try another one. Please stay healthy and well. Take care of yourself and others around you. Be kind, and we'll see you soon.